Okay, this is just a quick video. This is to cover what nobody else covers on oil filters. Nobody else is telling you. Nobody else has really examined, at least from what I've seen on the videos. And I have two popular elements here. Now, this is a real world test that I've done. This is not just cut the filter open. These are both used filters. This filter, which is a good filter, and this is not an advertisement for anybody, but this is what it came out of, one of these canisters. And I'm going to go over a few quick things to help you to understand oil filters and what is hype on a lot of these things. Okay, first let me say, with this type of oil filter, a screw-on canister, when the filter mounts in this position in your vehicle, where this is on the top, it does not matter what kind of an anti-drain back valve is in there, because gravity is going to hold the oil in here and it's not going to drain back into the engine. So it doesn't even matter. You could take the anti-drain back valve out, would not make a bit of difference. It's only when the filter is this way or it's this way that the anti-drain back valve comes into play. What is the anti-drain back valve? Okay, this is it on this filter. What it does, this is the end cap right here, and the way that works is this here, which is just a piece of rubber, this right here, piece of rubber, basically it covers these holes up so that when the engine's not running, it stops the oil from going back in to the engine and depleting the filter of oil. That's what it's for. And the silicone are a little bit better quality, found on more expensive oil filters than this is. However, this does a pretty good job. Now I'd like to talk about, everybody complains and says this filter is a really cheap filter because it has what appears to be cardboard ends. And so they really put this filter down because of that. As opposed to this filter right here, it has metal ends. Okay, a couple of things I've got to say here. So what? And I don't mean to offend everybody, but so what? If this does the same job as this does, and these are both used, this is still holding everything together, it doesn't matter as far as whether it's metal or not. But I'm going to show you something that does matter. Maybe a small difference, but it is a difference. Look at how much filter area this takes up or takes away from your filtering, as opposed to how thin the top one is here. So, given the same length, and these are two different filters, but given the same length, you actually have a little more filter area on the top and bottom. Now let's talk about pleats, because there's all kinds of videos where they get on there and they count the pleats. And I was quite surprised. Now this filter, to be honest with you, I washed it out with gas. It has sit for probably a year. It's dried out, so it's not going to show you exactly the same results as when I first took it apart. However, when I took it apart, I'm going to turn this around. These right here, and you can see they're still spread out, but they were way out there. They were way out there, spread out. And many of these, get a close-up here, like these here, they were just bunched together. Even now, if you look at it, bunched together, these are bunched together. And this is a year later. Bunched together, bunched together, bunched together, bunched together, bunched together. You can see a few little here and there where they're not bunched together. What happens? Well, all of those pleats, the oil pressure comes in here and goes to pushing. The oil wants to go through this filter, and it wants to come out through this hole down here. And so you've got all that pressure pushing on it. What happens then a lot of these cleats, they're close together, they just push themselves shut. And I would say probably 75–80% of the oil was flowing right here, because all these other pleats, and I mean there will be gaps here and there where they all pushed it apart, but so many of these other pleats became useless. They was not even being used because of the oil. Now let's talk about another thing, the holes here. And when it comes to these base plates, you know, not a lot of difference as far as integrity of strength. But typically on a lot of your engines, where these oil filters screw onto the engine block, there's going to be one round hole, and that's where the oil is shooting out of the block. And then the oil then can come into this little valley, work its way around, and shoot through all these different holes. Well, it's my opinion that most likely whichever hole lined up with the hole in the housing this screwed into, you had the most pressure. And that most pressure coming down probably hit the filter right here, separated the pleats. Although, from the looks of the gluing on it, I can see where they were glued further apart. So what am I saying? I'm saying all of those pleats doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a better job of filtering, because if the pleats squeeze together, no oil can flow through it, and when no oil can flow through it, then that part of the filter is useless. Now, let's look at this one. Everybody talks about being a cheaper filter. And the pleats in this, which here again, it does have a wide pleat, but still the pleats in these didn't all close up like they did on this one. So, is more pleats better? Not if they close up. That doesn't make them any better at all. If they close up, you've just lost that part of your filter medium. Alright, now let's talk about the spring, or what everybody calls a spring here. In this filter, I put it right here, this is the relief valve. The spring is actually in the top. This is your release valve. I don't know if I can see this good. This is your release valve, not this. The purpose of this is simply to hold this filter solid into the filter canister so that the filter itself cannot move this way. It keeps it solid. And then if you have a pressure release valve, where this is blocked or the oil's real thick and it won't flow, you have this up here, and that is going to let the oil bypass the filter, hence the term bypass valve. Not this. This holds the filter securely in its position. This right here seals it just like that. Now everybody seems to like coil springs on the top, and for some reason a lot of people think coil springs are better. Let me say this. Take a regular ink pen, just a regular ink pen that you can click and write with it, and click and then no longer write with it. Take it apart, take the spring out, push the spring in. I'm talking about a regular coil spring. What will happen, that spring will want to bend in the middle, and before you know it, it'll want to flex and it'll want to shoot out. Coil springs have a tendency to want to bend one way or another when you put pressure on them. Well, if you got a coil spring and it bends to one side or to the other, this filter is going to rock to one side or the other. So is a coil spring better? Not necessarily. Look at the suspension in an automobile. You have leaf springs and you have coil springs. With a leaf spring, that axle is going to stay pretty much in alignment. If you've got a coil spring, then you've got to add extra suspension components in there to keep that thing from moving around. So, you know, use some common sense when you're discussing oil filters. And if you got any questions, put them down. I'm sure some of you are not going to like this little video. But it's all about how the filter performs once it's in the vehicle. It's not about how many pleats are in it. because more please doesn't necessarily make it better. It's not necessarily about metal on the end caps. Metal will rust. This will not rust. Metal will take up more space. This will take up less space. They both do filtering. The end result, which is something nobody can tell you, is this. After X amount of miles, which filter offers the least amount of resistance to oil flow through it, and which filter collects the most debris, sludge, metal filings, whatever. And none of the cutting the filters apart will tell you that. So I hope this will help you to stop and rethink filters a little bit. One thing else I'll talk about is this seal here. I've never had a problem with any of these seals. If you put the filter on right, it doesn't matter if it's silicone, doesn't matter if it's an O-ring, doesn't matter if it's flat. Never had a problem with any of those seals. And once again, with this cheaper oil filter, I've never had any problem with those either. You know, change the filter every time you change your oil. If you're going with a synthetic oil and you're only changing every 10,000 miles, go with a better filter. If you're changing every 3,000 miles with a standard grade oil, go with just an inexpensive oil filter. That's my thoughts. This is just an old-time mechanic, and wishing you have a good day. Bye now.